Founder, Chairman, and CEO, Vista Equity Partners.
Please, got to keep another round of applause, Mr. Smith. Come on.
Too kind. Thanks.
Got to show you some love while we're here, man.
I always get love at Morehouse campus.
Yes, you
man.
do.
I appreciate it.
Man,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. How you feeling?
Terrific. Feeling good.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. You feel any different when you come back here at all? Like, 2019, you paid off student loan. Where were you at when I was in college?
Hey, man. I was following you in college. I'm a little younger than you.
But it feel any different when you come back up?
No, it's always a very warm, welcoming place. I mean, the students here and the faculty and staff, everyone does a great job, I think, really building a community. I call it a beloved community. This is one of those places that really defines beloved community. So it's always a wonderful place to come back and feel welcomed and a part of.
Yeah. Over 100 billion in assets under management. The enterprise software companies, over 80 enterprise, over 80 enter.
91, but
91.
Yeah, but who's counting?
Yeah.
Me. I'm counting. Yeah.
You're a leading player in the enterprise software industry. What you've built is just impressive. And you ever sit down and just take a breath and look at it all? And if you do, what is the feeling?
No.
No?
No. What I do is move forward every day. The beautiful thing about software and in technology is that it's always evolving. Our businesses now, we operate in over 180 countries. We have 750 million users of our software globally. There's various transition points in technology that require one to not only understand, but think about how to embrace how this technology will enable these companies to be more successful. Early stages of this, all 25 years ago now, it was all on premise. Then we went through a transition where this new thing called the cloud, and I'd struck up a partnership with this company called AWS that people didn't know was supporting this company, Amazon. And a guy, Andy Jassy, and cut a deal where we could actually drive some of our companies onto that platform because I needed to compute. And that enabled us to transition really more companies from on-prem to cloud of any on the planet. Then you have this whole mobile first, the IoT, IoE, Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, which creates massive opportunities for digital infrastructure to enable efficacy and proficiency and productivity across the planet. And I like to say, enterprise software is the most productive tool that's been introduced in our business economy in the last, 50 years, and likely will be the next 50. And now we have this new thing called artificial intelligence. 10 years ago, we started implementing, 12 years ago, AI, ML, machine learning into our businesses. And now with generative AI, there's a new inflection point, and it's a massive inflection point. And it is actually going to have more profound implications on how we all live and work and engage than, frankly, any other technology that we've experienced. The beauty of enterprise software, which is what I focus on, which is business software, is less than 1% of the enterprise data actually lives in these foundational models. We all have, through one way, shape, form, or another, given up a lot of our personal data to these foundational models, and those foundational models have pretty much absorbed all of that. And now they're building out systems to create new data and simulate data because it's absorbed all of this other data. But the enterprise data, this is the data that sits in companies, is not absorbed in those models. And as a result of that, it creates a massive opportunity for us as Vista to utilize our capacity to leverage what we'll call the sovereignty and dominion of these workflows and data sets to create agentic solutions that will actually even be more efficient in the work that they do relative to what would be a standard deployment of an enterprise application. So you don't have time to sit back. What you have time to do is continually lean forward and lean into what these opportunity sets are and building the right partnerships. And so now I built a partnership, and we built our first agentic factory with Microsoft as our partner there in Anthropic, and now we're having, Google has now come on board to be our next wave of our agentic partnership that we think will keep us in the forefront of transitioning and evolving our enterprise software companies to really serve our customers. So it's a pretty fascinating space to be involved in today.
I definitely want to dive into the agentic part a little bit, but as we sit here in 2025, so much is going on around the country. We were in your office and kind of mentioning some of those things, but what is Robert Smith paying close attention to as we enter 2026 from a social standpoint?
So the most important thing that I am focused on right now is ensuring that, I'm a steward of capital. Many of your, parents, if they're, in pension, if they have in a pension position, i.e. they're, teachers or doctors or firefighters or policemen, all those sort of things, we manage a lot of that money. And it's critically important for us to ensure that we are great stewards of that capital. Because that actually creates, I call it the virtuous flywheel of a societal construct. If we are successful in what we do, it increases the wealth and welfare of the constituencies that support us. That then gives them the opportunity to have their kids go to college, buy houses, all those sorts of things. And so that's kind of the most important thing for me to think about. The second is ensuring that we have built out capacity to do that at larger scale. Like I talked about, this Gen AI is an element of that that's going to be an enabler, a massive enabler of this opportunity set. The backside of that, it is going to affect every knowledge worker on the planet. There are about 1 billion knowledge workers, and knowledge workers in essence are everyone from who's managing a call center to a lawyer, right? And what are you doing as a knowledge worker? You're often engaging with some system. Some software system, maybe a news feed, whatever it is, you're processing it, reasoning it, and you're putting that information back into a system or a person. And then that dynamic actually will be enhanced initially by AI. Part of that work, you can do the processing much more efficiently, faster, lower latency, higher frequency, lower error rates using agents. What that does is it actually frees up people on the one hand to be more human in their interactions and the things that they do. But, the logical extension of that is like, at some point in time, do you actually need those people doing that work? And if that's the case, then how do you think about the impact of work? And what is the impact of work in community and community opportunities? So those are things that I think about in that context. And say, okay, what can you do about it? There's a lot. We are, one of the things we focus on is our SCI, which is our, Southern Communities Initiative.
Yes.
Where we are building out and have built out a series of programs, one of which is the digitization of CDFIs. About 70% of African-American communities actually don't have branch banks in their community of major banks. In fact, the neighborhood I grew up in didn't have a branch bank, and there is one now. It's Wells Fargo. So I think they're a sponsor here, which is great. And I'm excited about that. But what that does is actually limits the amount of capital that can then be delivered into our small to medium businesses. I was actually this morning with the mayor and with our program, and our executive director, Jahai, is sitting in the back. Well done. Because what he's actually done with our team is built out now 3 of these CDFIs. And the lending rates, and it liberates, between $6 and $30 million more of capital that can be lent into these communities at, 10, 12. I met with 3 of them today. Their average loan is $5,000 or $15,000 or $50,000, in some cases $250,000. But they're small amounts of money that made a huge impact into the community. But if you don't have a digital capacity to manage loans at scale, then you can't deliver that money. So with the mayor's leadership and our partnership, we are enabling that to happen in this community and 5 other communities. So when I think about areas that I can, areas that I can uniquely impact, these are things that I have unique skills and capabilities to deliver. There are other people who have unique skills and capabilities. They have to go deal with other problems that our community is facing as a result of, shifting dynamics. But I always have taken the approach, do things that you can do something about. Put your energy there. I can sit and complain about this and that, but if I can't do anything about it, it's idle time. Yeah. But I can do something about digitizing our communities. I can do something about enabling our communities, enabling the improvement of the health and the welfare, the student loan debt with those. I know how to do that stuff. And so that's why I drive my efforts towards.
Yeah. Before you got into this agentic AI and AI in general and built Vista, you were a young kid in Colorado growing up. Take me back to that young, curious Robert that was just fascinated by the world of tech, trying to get into a company. Take me back to that young, curious Robert. What were you like as a young kid coming up in Colorado? You grew up around a family of achievers.
Yeah, both, I was still this handsome. And of course, remained humble this whole time. No, my parents were both educators, and so the world, and I lived in an all-black community, and I call it, and it was a beloved community. It was a community where, you know, the resources that you needed in the community, you got from the community. If you wanted to learn how to play the piano, you went to Mrs. Buckner's house because she was a piano teacher. If you wanted to learn how to be a carpenter, you go to Mr. Robbins' house because he, you know, had a carpentry business. And you saw when when we got out of school, because you get out a little bit early, and you know all the parents were out working. There were neighbors who took care of the kids, and when you were in that environment, the older kids tutored the younger kids and all that sort of thing. So I always felt kind of loved and protected in that environment. That's an important part of being a beloved community, and creating these communities is essential, and it takes, you know, strong leadership, and it also takes strong followership where everybody has to make their contribution. But things that sparked interest for me came out of those environments. And I always mention this. There's a guy by the name of Homer Denny, which none of you will ever know. But this was a time in the age of rocketry, and he decided to create a rocket club. And there was a bunch of us running around there, and we're shooting people off to the moon. He's like, these little kids, these little brown kids, who understand principles of rocketry, and we built rockets and we shot them off. 6 out of the 8 kids in that club became basically STEM students, you know, either doctors or engineers. And it's because of those little, you know, sparks of inspiration that created the aperture of curiosity to continue to open. And from that, and of course, you know, my parents, you know, focusing on reading and the importance of reading. You know, like there were certain people in our neighborhood, you know, who made sure that on Saturday mornings we were at the public library and they read stories to the little kids.
Not watching cartoons?
No. I mean, that wasn't the deal. And so you'd go down. I went to the library every Saturday morning with my mom, right? And they had a woman there, God, I remember her name in a second. And she used to sit there and read stories to the little kids, right? All morning. And so those are the sorts of the dynamics, I think, that, and my mom would make us check out 10 books, and we had to read those 10 books that week, in addition to the schoolwork, you know what I mean? But it was those sort of, the threads of a fabric of a community that made a difference. And when I look at the kids that I grew up with and who had a chance to participate in that, almost all were actually very successful in not only, you know, their lives, but in the families that they built. But that's being a part of a community. And so, you know, young Robert Smith grew up in that. So I didn't think there was anything different than that. And so, you know, I kind of got out into the world a little bit and saw that, wow, not everybody grew up in that type of community. And while we didn't have a bank, and we didn't have a supermarket or any of those things that you know, our communities were starved of, and some argument, you know, may have been systemically starved of, I always felt like we could provide ourselves the things that we needed to progress. You know, that the optimism of America in the late 60s, right, and in the early 70s. You know, I'm the first generation to have all of my rights in America, right? And it's important that we maintain those rights: the right to vote, the right to be educated, okay, right to be able to live anywhere you wanted, marry who you wanted. All those are important rights that were hard fought by, of course, people who led the charge out of this community, out of Atlanta, right? And you know, here I am, thousands of miles away, but it resonated in my community. And so our communities rallied around the messages of Dr. King and others who were, and Malcolm X and others, about, okay, here's what we need to do to advance our people. And I always like to say it helped us understand that we are enough to change the condition of our family and our community. And I think that's a big part of how I grew up. And I just happen to have an intellectual curiosity around math and science that led me down a path that enabled me to do what I do today. But all of that is based fundamentally in how I grew up and the community that I grew up in, where not only my parents, but the adults in my community believed in us. Yeah. And they believed in me. And they believed in our ability to learn, to enable, to do, to accomplish. And, you know, they established, you know, standards that they held you to. And if you weren't performing in a certain standard, it wasn't just your parents telling you about it, it was your aunties and your uncles, right, telling you that you need to do a little better at this. And you may not have been related to them, but they were in your house all the time, or you were at their house all the time. But they were telling you are better than this. You can be better than that. And that was just a constant, very positive pressure that we need to just continue to ensure that occurs in our communities, in our neighborhoods.
Do you see that missing today?
I wouldn't say I see it missing. I would say that we have in some communities, it's interesting, I get a chance to now travel around and see. I was in Detroit a couple weeks ago, I was in Nashville, and then I get a chance to talk to parents, teachers, educators, all that sort of a thing. There seems to be a little more disconnectedness in some respects. And part of it is we all are living in our own individual worlds much more, right? I kind of just observe when I'm going and you see, 80% of the people now in the coffee shop are sitting like this as opposed to sitting like this. Yeah. I go to the museums and you kind of see that same sort of dynamic. I'll tell you, Nashville, I went a couple weeks ago, and they've got the National Museum of African American Music. And I highly recommend that you go. This dude's raising his hand. That place is dope, right? And, I heard about it, but when I went, I was like, this is amazing. And the digital platforms that they use for teaching, educating, informing, and they got this dance room. I think I got voted like best dancer of the year, something. Anyway, but I mean, it is a fascinating place to go, and you see the connectedness in that community. Similar in Detroit. I went to the Wright Museum in Detroit, same sort of dynamic, but you can also see that they are wrestling with how they connect to the power that those communities brought. Detroit in particular. Martin Luther King gave an "I Have a Dream" speech that you all have heard. But the backstory behind that was that was in August. In June, he was in Detroit, and that's where he first delivered the sketches of that speech. And when he showed up in Washington, D.C., he had a completely different speech written. And Mahalia Jackson, the mother of the civil rights movement, said, "Martin, tell him about the dream. Tell him about the dream." And he abandoned the speech that was written and basically went to that place, right? There's that kind of heritage that sits in our communities that is not lost. It is not forgotten. But I can see the elders trying to figure out how do they re-embrace the youth to understand that spirit of progress and their role in that. Because, look, the elders, they've got the wisdom, the experience, but they don't necessarily have what I call the legs to get out in the streets anymore, right? And I was so proud, and I have to tell when at the time, we were getting into COVID, murder of George Floyd, how these young people got in the streets, okay? We hadn't seen that in a long time, okay? The elders are kind of sitting back, oh man, this is messed up, this is again, okay? And these young people are like, well, no, we ain't standing for this. And they got up and they went out in the street, you know what I mean? And that showed me that there is that hope, that people are going to continue to drive forward on what they think is right and what they think is just in the treatment of Americans. And I was very proud of our people for doing that, our young people for doing that.
Well, how does Robert Smith lead at a time of division in our country?
Again, I've got unique skills and capabilities to enable Gen AI to be an effective ally of not only the platform that I operate, but to drive it as effectively as possible into our communities. You probably know this, Morehouse, Spelman, we actually have an AI curriculum here, and I think it's more Spelman students go than Morehouse students. But anyway, there are those sorts of things. You have to understand and embrace this technology. And it's up to people who have unique skills, capabilities, and I hope more of our community who has that actually comes and delivers platforms and opportunity. Our Intern XL platform, where we've got, I think it's over 1,200 courses that you go on. It's free, by the way, for students, right? Where you can actually learn and enable, build your skill set to become more effective at understanding how this technology is going to change your life. On the one hand, get skills so you can start to get some experiences, be a more effective entrepreneur, encourage people to take risk. One of the things in our community that is important is for us to take more risk, to become more entrepreneurial. And, my generation was truly a generation of, get educated so you can go get a job. okay? And, you know, I got lots of criticism from my family about leaving my job to start a business. But I think we have to, you know, change that narrative more in our community to say, be more entrepreneurial, take more risk, build relationships. These things are important where you're actually building people of like mind and, you know, invest fast and all these sort of things and say, hey, listen, take some risk, invest in each other, invest in yourself to go create businesses that can truly change the dimension and direction of your life. And then, of course, enable you to deliver, I'll call it more value to your community. All those things are important parts that we have to now understand are going to become more essential as the economy evolves.
Yeah. You ever think about running for president?
No, I got a good job.
Why not?
I've got a great job. I like my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you did, what would be the first thing you would tackle?
I don't know, but I'm not thinking about that.
There is a man, you were talking about this backstage, that, you know, you have a philosophy on how you develop talent within your company.
Yeah.
That is that you build through the draft, not the trade.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that.
Yeah, what I look for and what we look for, look, there's all things, but we look for people who are coming out who have high aptitude, high capability, want to learn, and then put them in environments where they can be successful by finding out what they're actually good at. Sometimes you say, man, I want to do this. We say, but you're actually pretty good at this. And we have, you know, aptitude tests and personality profiles that give it. Why don't you try the thing that we think you're going to be good at and see how that will work. And we have found that is a very effective way of growing businesses. And, you know, doing it at scale is always a challenge. But we think long-term, finding people who are eager, ambitious, intelligent, capable, curious, and hungry, and who want to make a difference. Those are the sort of people we see really, you know, really excel in our environments.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, we're talking about agentic AI. You know, I'm very passionate about that because, you know, agentic AI, the ability for computers to do everything without any human intervention, right? When you look at the jobs and the sectors that could be impacted, what do you see? What jobs do people maybe need to stay away from as they move forward?
I don't know if it's stay away from. You just got to understand how to embrace this technology and capture the utility of it. It is going to impact every single business on the planet and every single job on the planet. I would say that, you know, there's 1 billion knowledge workers on the planet, which make up $40 trillion in essence of you know, salaries and spend. A lot of that, of course, is India and China, other places, call centers, all sort of. All of that's going to be impacted. Some of it more dramatically than others. And so there is no safe place on the one hand, but it creates massive opportunity. Anytime you have a new, we call it general purpose technology introduced, it changes the landscape of opportunity for everything. You know, from the steam engine, that was a general purpose technology, right? And then you had electricity, that's a general purpose technology. This is a general purpose technology. It will literally impact the way lawyers do their work and the way that plumbers are contracted to go do their work and how they're paid, okay, the digital systems, all that. So you've got to actually understand first, what is the area of interest? Again, I have always found the most successful people are doing things that they're passionate about. So that's one thing. And then you got to figure out, well, what is the business dynamic around that I can actually turn that into a highly successful business, right? And AI can help you do that at a much faster rate than what you could do 4 years ago. And so I think, again, we have to encourage all of our youth to embrace this technology to enable them to be their best selves and to create economic opportunity and advancement, and not just make videos that are funny, unless those videos that are funny can actually create a whole lot of impressions that they get paid for. Then go for it, right? So there's all of those dynamics, and these are new things. You know, I was with one of my kids, we were talking about, business models, and 5 or 8 years ago, I want to be an influencer, this and that, and you're like, what? But then you see these influencers making tens of millions of dollars because they've actually, like Mr. Beast, right? I mean, this dude's, right? You see, so you can't, and I was with actually some parents, I think I was in Detroit talking about it, and I was like, you don't necessarily poo-poo that child's idea, because there are platforms, ecosystems, and infrastructures where that idea can actually be made economically, not only economically viable, but economically prosperous, right? And so you got to be just more thoughtful about it, and then utilize tools to get you there faster. Like, all right, AI, if I want to be this, how do I do it most effectively? It'll give you some ideas, may give you some wrong answers, but it will start to, stem some ideas about business models and those sort of things. So utilizing those tools to accelerate what is your ambition, I think, is an important part of what our community needs to embrace.
Yeah. It said, please wrap up, but it go on, so I'm going to get two more things in here.
Yeah.
But the first is I cannot.
My rate's high, just understand what I'm getting paid. But yeah.
I can't let you get out of here without asking you, how do the black community, 2.1 trillion is what our spending power is expected to be in 2026.
Yeah.
That's according to Nielsen. But how do you build wealth? What is Robert Smith's steps to building wealth as we sit here in 2025 on out?
Yeah, I think, get informed on wealth building techniques that are applicable to your condition. And if you say, oh man, here's my condition, I have no capital today. Okay, how do you build capital in a way that is sustainable for you? And for some people, it might be buying a house, okay? And then leveraging the money out of that house to invest in a business. That may be what your condition is. For other people, no, I'm better off renting and taking the money, right, depending upon what the condition is, and putting it into my business. Let me go find one of these CDFIs and go find Jahai in the back of the room and say, hey, man, how do I go borrow $50,000 to start this business?
Stand up so everybody can see where you are.
Well, no, I didn't want to do that to you, but okay, right? But it is that dynamic of figuring out what are the opportunities. There's opportunities like, so I've had a chance to go to a bunch of HBCUs, and I was with one HBCU president, and she's like, I am so tired of buying food from, large national chain, fill in the blank. How come I can't buy it from, African-American co-op and farmers? And then I go to another city and I hear somebody talk about, we control a number of African-American co-ops and farmers. And a good friend of mine, the African-American, has a ranch, cattle ranch, and he's, branding beef. And I'm like, okay, if I was 24 years old, I'd be putting that together, okay? And I get to all the HBCUs and say, guess what? We're now buying all of our beef, our vegetables from this group, and it's going to support the community. So it's those sort of things. But you got to understand what your condition is, and then how do you leverage technology, platforms, infrastructure in ways that you couldn't 10 years ago? Because you can contact everyone. I will guarantee you, every one of those farmers in these co-ops, their information's out there someplace, okay? And I can guarantee you can probably figure out what they produce, and you can probably figure out what the consumption is of the HBCUs, and you can probably link them up together and find probably 44 lawyers sitting in this audience who can help you write contracts to do it, right? That's what I'm saying, okay? But you got to decide that you want to take some risk to improve your condition, okay? Because I will tell you, your condition will likely deteriorate if you don't, given how some of these, information technology and knowledge worker businesses are going to change if you're not embracing these technologies.
Yeah. Now I can get you out of here on this. I promised your folks I was going to ask you about the Southern Communities Initiative, but you already touched on it.
Yeah, and you can just Jahai just stood up, so you just go talk to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's very impressive, though. Did you read that?
It is, I know, and it's a good-looking guy on here, right?
Yeah.
Robert F. Smith.
Yeah, there you go, right? Yeah.
I always end my conversations with good to great. Now it says time is up. How does one get from good to great, in Robert Smith's opinion?
It is a few things. So, last year, 2 years ago, my cousin called me 3 years ago, and my cousin says, hey, he's a cancer survivor. He said, I'd like for you to go on this journey with me. And I don't know if any of you've read, Paulo Coelho has his first book is called The Pilgrimage, and it's called the Camino de Compostela, right, de Santiago. I don't know if anybody here go on that yet. Okay, a few hands in the back, right? Enlightened people. I would highly recommend all of you go at some point in time and do this walk. The long walk is 34 days. I ain't walking 34 days. So I did 6 days. My cousin says, let's go. I said, all right. And when you read the book, and I've read The Pilgrimage a couple of times, it is supposed to be a very solo journey, a journey of reflection and all that sort of stuff. So I'm like, cool, let's go. And before we're about to go, like a couple months before, my wife's like, aren't you going on this long walk? You haven't been training. I said, I got this. So one morning I wake up, I'm in New York. It's like 4:30. I said, all right, I'm going to walk down the South Street Seaport and walk back. And, it's 2.5 hours. I was like, all right, this should be nothing. Yeah, it's a whole different deal because you're walking like 8 to 10 hours a day, and it's up hills, and it's not walking in Manhattan. Anyway, so we get over there, and my cousin, hopefully this isn't recorded, love him, but he likes to talk a lot, right? And this is supposed to be a solo journey. So the first day, he talks the whole time. I'm like, well, this ain't the point of the thing, I heard. And I have a little speaker on my backpack. So I said, I tell you what, if I have my music playing, that means I'm like in contemplation, deep thought, don't talk to me. He's like, all right, I got that. So I played my music for 5 days straight. But what that gave me was two things. I came out of that with two things. The first was, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, when you replay the tape of your life over, there's these decisions that you deal with, and did you make the right decision here and there? And then when you have that kind of, when you're walking 8 to 10 hours a day, you're not on your phone, and you have a chance to kind of think about what happens and occasions and all that sort of stuff. And so I felt really good about that. And then the other thing was what I call the intention of going forward. And this is kind of the success piece of this, in answering your question, is always speak your truth with love. And that's why I am. It's like, there's some things, hey, I was like, nah, you know, I'm not doing that because I don't want to. Okay, it doesn't mean your thing isn't important, and it's probably important to you, but that's not important to me right now. But speak that truth with love. And I found stress goes away. You can actually think a whole lot clearer. It is a wonderful cleansing that I had an opportunity to go through, and I highly recommend people go. And I'm going to try to take my oldest son next year. I'm going to make him do 34 days. I'm going to catch him on the last 6. And I hope that as a younger man, it enables him to look more on the front part of that than the reflection part of it. So that's what I talk to.
Love it. Speak your truth with love. Robert F. Smith.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.